G'day and welcome back. Been doing a bit more riding lately, and I noticed when I was cleaning my chain, it was not quite fitting very well around the sprocket. Now this is a new sprocket, and I'll tell you why that's a new sprocket. Here is the old sprocket, and just look at the difference in the teeth. Okay, see how you've actually got a flat spot on the top of the tooth there, whereas on this one there is no flat spot. They actually call this shark toothing because the points get that sharp, they look like a shark's tooth. And on these ones here, these ones right there, you can actually see that it was chipping the top of the tooth. Some of them are chipping as well, like that one there. But I mean, you put them next to each other and you can tell the difference in the thickness between them. But what I noticed first was, one, that they were getting quite pointy, but my chain had stretched that much that it wasn't fitting into the valleys of these of the sprocket. It was sitting up here because the distance between one chain roller and the next are designed to fit in nicely inside here, but as the chain stretches, it gets longer and they sit on the outside so they don't sit as low. So when it goes around the tighter part of the sprocket, which is the back end here, I was getting a lot of gaps. The chain wasn't sitting nice and neatly down there, and because of that, it actually promotes more chain wear because you're wearing, it's not spreading the load through the whole part of the sprocket, it's only off the top of the teeth, which is why you wear out your sprocket quicker. Part of the reason why they say when you change your sprockets, change your chain, or if you change your chain, change your sprockets as well. And I also had a bit of a look at my front sprocket, and this one's newer because I changed this when I bought the bike, because the guy had the chain that tight. It just seemed a bit unusual. So when I backed off the tension on the chain, and I started riding the bike, I started getting slipping because the chain was actually slipping on the sprocket, at the front sprocket. You can't really see the front sprocket, it's got a guard over it. So when I took it off, it was worse than this is now, but this isn't too bad because we still have flat spots on the top. The other one was like completely worn down, but you do notice that, I'll try and see how the teeth at the top are bending. It's not a massive amount of bend, but there is bending on the top end of the sprocket tooth because, again, the chain has stretched and the rollers on the chain, which are the internal rollers which roll in around the actual teeth, were sitting high, and that's the part that was driving because it wasn't letting it go down into the flute here. I think it's called the gullet, something like that. And that's where the drive is meant to be, from down here, down low, the thick part of the sprocket where it's stronger. But because the chain was elongated, the links were all elongated that much, it was riding high, and it actually was bending the top of the sprocket tooth because that's where it was driving from. The main force was driving from there. And it would have bent that over until the roller engaged on the thicker part of the tooth, which is why they're all just that little bit bent over. So I changed the rear sprocket, and they didn't have a front sprocket, but that's since come in now, and now I'm just put the new front sprocket on there, and you can see that there, brand new front sprocket. So I thought I'd show you how to do this. Getting the old one off was pretty easy. You basically remove your rear axle and take your wheel off, and you just got, it's just nuts and bolts. So you got, and these aren't normal nuts, they're metal lock washer nuts. You've probably heard of nylon lock washer nuts. These are the same sort of thing, but instead of a nylon locking mechanism, it has like a little, at the end of the nut there is a bit of a thin piece of metal on the inside that actually keeps pressure on the thread as it passes through, and that's a metal lock washer nut. They're reusable, which nylon lock nuts aren't supposed to be reusable, but people do reuse them because they sort of still work. But constant undoing a nylon lock nut will not hold. Each time you undo it and undo it, it'll get looser and looser, whereas these ones, they hold their tension. So basically you just remove the nuts and the bolts, sprocket comes off, give it a good clean up, and because it sits on a raised hub section there, and bolt your sprocket back on. So no big deal, pretty easy. Front one is a little different. If you see the inside of the sprocket, this one is got a spline drive on it. So the shaft that it's going on has a spline. It fits over that, and there's a little plate there with two holes. Two bolts go through the plate and thread into the actual sprocket. Okay, but to get these threads to line up with that sprocket, there is actually a groove machined into the shaft, so that once you push, because that little locking plate, I suppose, or retaining plate, is actually slotted the same as the sprocket, so it slides on the shaft, but the orientation of the slotting won't always match up with the orientation of the thread holes. So there is a groove machined just, well, basically where that is sitting, there's a groove in the shaft. So once you push that retainer past the spline to sit into that groove, you can then rotate it to match the the holes on the actual sprocket. And because it's sitting in that groove and it's screwed to that, it won't allow you to get it off, right? So the way that plate works is you line it up with the spline, it slides on, right? But once you get it past the spline, you then rotate it a little bit so the splines no longer match up with the spline cutting on the actual retainer. So that is how it retains on there, and that gets screwed to the sprocket, so the sprocket can't move back. And because the spline no longer lines up with the retainer, it can't come off either. And that's how that works. And you just screw these two. I chuck a little bit of thread lock on these because you don't want them coming off, because then we don't want this vibrating and coming off, because you can't see once you put the cover on. Mine has holes in it, but once you fit it, you can't see a lot in there. And it's a good practice to actually, after each ride, especially if you're out in the bush or especially in mud, to remove this, because your chain drags mud into here, and even though there's holes, a lot of it stays in there. As you can see, it's quite, like, I've given it a clean out from the debris, but it's stained from mud and stuff getting in there. So yeah, good practice. Only 2 bolts. This is plastic, mind you. It's just a guard, basically, cover to help stop larger items getting dragged into there while you're riding. But it's good to remove it and clean in there, because yeah, you're just creating friction and helping your chain sprocket excuse me, to wear. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to fit the new chain. Okay, so we'll set you up, zoom in as much as we can. So this chain I brought here, HK. It's look, this is not, by means, not the most expensive chain. It says this is designed for off-road ATV, enduro and desert use. It's an O-ring chain. My last one was not an O-ring chain. These are supposed to last longer. This was pretty much $100. There's the price tag, $99.95. I got it from AMX. And yeah, I've sort of used a fair bit. That rear sprocket is another RHK rear sprocket. I think that sprocket was about $90. Rear sprocket 60, nearly $70. Yeah, the front sprockets have gone up. I remember the last one I bought was only about $25. So yeah, a bit of a price rise. But it's been quite a few years too since I bought a front sprocket. All right, so we'll get this out of here. This is a 520 chain, which is why it's a bit dearer too. There are cheaper ones, but it depends on what your bike takes. This came with two joiner links, which I like, but you only need one. So as you notice, you've got in this little bag, there are 4 O-rings, a joiner link with I don't know, 2 poles, I suppose, to go through the 2 links of chain, and out another 2 O-rings that go on the other side, and you have your retainer, and there is also a locking split pin in there somewhere. I did see it, but it's hiding somewhere now, but we'll get that out soon. Now, let's get this out of there. There's no specific weight, and it looks like it's pre-lubed, which is good. So let's just feed one end through. Now it'll help a lot if you, I had the engine in gear while I was doing this up, so that wouldn't keep spinning on me, but now I need that sprocket to rotate freely, so I will take it out gear. So now we're in neutral. Let's take that out of the way. So now, we'll take the weight off the chain, sit it on the sprocket a little bit, and we'll try and rotate it. With your chain. Sorry if I'm blocking your view, and go through your chain guard. Okay. Now seems our chain is excessively long, and we're going to have to shorten it. So this is probably a generic 520 chain. It's not bike specific. I do have a chain breaker, and so it's no problem to remove that, but we want to get the maximum life out of this, so we'll push the wheel in as far as it will go, so then we can get the maximum adjustment back, because it will stretch, and it will stretch a fair bit on probably the first ride because it's new, but then it'll settle down after that. But you do periodically need to take up a little bit of tension. This is a bit of a unique design I found on this. Is a CRF 230. It's nothing special. It's a 2005 model. It's actually the fun bike version, not the road version. But it has quite a good chain adjuster, I've found, because a lot of them have nuts you have to undo, and hello Gixie, good girl. Yeah. Yes, a lot of them have like a block with 2 lock nuts and a thread that you need to undo the lock nuts that lock it all up to hold it in place, and then turn the bolt, and that pushes the aluminium block which is over the axle and pushes the axle back, and you do the same on the other side to get your wheel alignment and chain alignment right and the tension, and then lock up your axle and then lock up your lock nuts. This system is a little bit different. It has these pins on each side mounted into the swing arm, and this sort of, it's a bit like a chain sprocket. It's got like indentations all the way around, and they're even numbered so that you can match one side to the other to keep your wheel parallel with your chain. So basically you just undo loosen your axle, and then if it's too loose, you just increase it, and it's a sort of off-centered round, like an egg-shaped circle. So as you turn it forward, it gets wider here and levers off this locating pin and pushes your wheel back to give you your chain tension, and you just count the graduations in between the numbers to make sure you're right on both sides. It's a pretty good system. I like it. It makes adjustment really easy. So, but what we've got to do now is we've got to remove a couple of links. First, I've got to make sure this wheel is all the way forward. So we'll go to the lowest setting on the, keep going around it. That's it. So we'll go to the lowest setting, push the wheel all the way forward, and there we are. So even if I line up with there, I still have a fair bit of slack, so I've got room to tension. So I will work on removing this link here. I'm going to put a texture mark on it so I don't get it mixed up. Like that. I still have a bit of slack there, so I'm going to remove this link here, and I will mark it on the back as well. So basically we'll be breaking this one, and then the joiner will go in there, and then we'll add tension, because we need 2 inner links, and then the joiner becomes the outer link to form the complete chain. Okay, so we'll break it on this particular line right here, and that will be our length of chain. Okay, I'll grab the chain breaker. Okay, now it's been a long time since I've done this, and I bought this chain breaker quite a while, mainly for my road bike. I borrowed a chain breaker off a mate of mine, which is a cheap Chinese thing. It did the job, but it was so very painful to use. So I bought this one, which was quite pricey, but it is a lot easier to use. I just have to remember how to do it. Chain breaker works a lot better if we grind off this rivet, because that's creating like a mushroom effect, bigger than the minor diameter of the link, side link here. So if we grind it off the mushroom part, we're just left with the inner diameter of the pin, so that we're not, the chain breaker isn't trying to force that mushroomed pin through the smaller diameter hole, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we're going to grind that off, and then we'll use the chain breaker to push the pin out. You don't necessarily need a chain breaker. You could grind that off and get a small pin and sit it over, you know, a gap between 2 pieces of steel and tap it out. That would work, like a pin punch, that as long as it's smaller to fit through the hole. You could test it to see if the pin fits through the hole before on one of the other links, or even the joining links before you attempt to tap it out. So you could do it that way. The chain breaker just makes it a lot easier. Okay. And if you take my advice, don't buy the cheap Chinese chain breakers. You can get them to work, but they are so difficult to use. I don't know what the newer ones are like if you bought one, but I tried a mate of mine just to get me out of trouble because I didn't have one, and it was a complete nightmare. I got it to work, but it was a real nightmare to use it. That's why I went and bought a decent chain breaker, so I wouldn't have these issues. Okay, so we're going to grind that off now. Just going to put some safety glasses on. Here's our mark. And I'm just using a flapper disc because I don't want to damage anything. Okay, now it's quite hard to see. I thought it would show up, but yeah, it's quite hard to see. Normally you would see where the link and a circle where the pin is, but I'm not seeing it. I might go down a little bit further to see if I can see that. Yeah, I'm just not seeing it. I think if I line up the chain breaker with the pin on the other side, once we put a bit of pressure and break that initial seating, it should become quite obvious. This chain breaker has two sizes. This pin, and it's quite nifty because it stores them in the handle. There it is there. So that's for got a large pin and a slightly smaller pin. Okay, so you check what size fits through your link as such, and this bigger pin will fit through ours, so I'm going to go with the bigger pin because it's going to be a bit stronger, less chance of breaking the pin. So that simply just removes, and the new one fits into place in there. And there's an O-ring that holds it in position. And the idea is that this will sit over the rear of the chain link, and it creates a hole to push, to support it sits on the back of this chain link with the mushroomed edge sitting in the hole, helps to centralize it, and then this is basically presses the pin out the other side through the hole to break the chain. So I'm going to need a spanner that's going to fit that. A spanner that fits that, and I've got one here. So let's get into it. That'll sit. Okay. Wind that down. Oh, didn't like that. And you just got to watch what your pin's doing because it's wanting to skate out. That's a bit of an issue. It could be just because of the angle it's on. And it's wanting to skate out again. So let's move it out further. I might try and... The issue I'm having is I can see my pin is pushing out and it's going to bend it, the angles. So I'm going to put something at the back here to hold the chain out. And I'm already starting to see I'll just take it out for a bit of a look now. Just for that little bit of pressure now. You can see it's actually broken the bond. So you can see the inner pin through the link there now. And I didn't really even put much pressure on it. So put that back in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide something at the back there. Just to keep that from moving backwards and forcing the pin on an angle. Got an Allen key here that may do the trick. Okay, that seems to be doing the job. We'll try that. And now I've just felt it break through. I mean, you're not going to see much, but it's actually going through now. And I'll just undo it because it won't take much. And I'll remove it if it'll give me. And you see how it's pushing the pin out now. See how we're pushing the pin out? And that pin will come all the way out the bottom, and then that'll separate those extra links from my chain. I won't need that anymore. So we'll screw that back down. And if you were breaking the chain on your actual bike, you could do this through while sitting on the sprocket if you wanted to. It'd probably be a lot easier. Wrong end. So we'll just continue around. Just that initial start to break it and get it moving. I needed that support at the back, mainly because I've got nothing holding this from twisting around while sitting on the bench. And I didn't want to bend that pin. Well, that's just gotten loose, so we're through now. So we'll back that out. And there is our pin. Right there. And now a link comes off. I wouldn't worry about those O-rings because the new one has O-rings. Okay, so now we've got our joiner, so it came in the kit. So now we can fit it. Okay, here we are back at the bike. I've threaded the chain through the front sprocket, through the chain wear guides there, and through the I suppose it's a chain protector to stop a sprocket protector, stops your foot getting dragged into the sprocket and getting trapped between the sprocket and the chain, also your hand. And it's through that, and it's around the outside, and the join is now sitting on top of the sprocket there. There we are. And I could have broken the chain on the sprocket. That would have worked fine with the chain breaker. It actually probably would have been easier because the chain would have held, sorry, the sprocket would have held the chain in a nice secure position while I broke the chain. But it was a bit hard to film it because to get the camera, I can't put the camera from the other side. So that's why I opted to do it on the bench. But you can do it on the bike more easier. But you need to install the chain join with the chain on the bike, because if you do it before you put the chain on, you will not be able to thread it through. You won't be able to install it because it has to go through like a couple of spots where you can't get a chain that's linked already through those positions. So make sure you thread the chain through and then you put your joiner on, or you'll be taking it off again. Now there are two types of joiners. There's the rivet type, which basically it makes it look like a normal chain link, and you press, you have to, well, you can, it looks very similar to this, which is a got a retaining clip on it, so you can remove it by hand without having to use a chain breaker. Looks very much like this, only you don't have these grooves at the end of the link, because once you install it and put your side plate on like that, you then use your chain breaker, which is also, mine's an installer as well. It has a little fitting on it that will go into the end here, and it's tapered, so that particular type of rivet type joiner has a hole in the center here, and you clamp that down in there, and that taper flares the end of the tube out, so that becomes your retainer, so that the side plate can't come off, because this gets flared out, gets bigger than the hole, and it basically locks it up in there. You do that to this one and the other side, and it basically becomes another chain link. It will look different to the other links on the chain, because it has a hollow section in the end, and that's how you identify that that's your chain join. So if you go to break it, that's probably the best place to break it, rather than another area. Okay, so let's get on to this one. This comes in the kit with the chain. It has little grooves for a retainer. Also has 4 O-rings, and you install one on each, we'll call it pin, and then it comes with a little packet of grease. You put some grease on there, you slide it through the 2 joins or 2 ends of your chain, and then you fit this little outside retainer over the chain. Once you put grease for the other O-rings on the other side, and then you fit this retainer clip. It's sort of a split. It's spring steel, and see the split in the gap there in the middle. So that will then, it sits over in that orientation like that, and use a pair of pliers to hold on to one of these pins and push the other end, and it will expand and clip over that side. But you must make sure that you're putting it in these grooves. Okay, so let's put that on now. Get some grease on it, get it sorted out. Use your little packet of grease that it comes with. If you have your own, you can use your own, you don't have to use this, but this is the same stuff that's been used on the chain, so let's use it. Okay, so basically you just squeeze a little bit of grease onto it out of the hole. You don't need too much, just a bit on each side. And just sort of spread it around with your finger. And that just keeps the O-rings lubricated. Move it around. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, it's got grease all over it. So now we'll install this from the back, because we need to fit the retaining clip, and it's a bit hard to do that from the back. And we'll also fit 2 more O-rings on this side. Add a little more grease to these O-rings. Just push it on the grease on. Spin around. And now we'll add our outer plate. There's my chain, and then you simply push that on. Make sure you've got enough protruding that you can get your side clip on. So basically now the clip goes on with the closed end, not the opened end, facing the direction of drive. So the wheel's going to be driven that way. When you're going forward, the wheel moves that way. So that's the direction of drive for the train. So that's the side that you clip it on from. So you put it over and slide it into the groove. Now these can be a little tricky to get on. Just make sure you compress the link a bit and slide it into the groove. Push it down so it's in the groove. Grab your pliers. Can I get the chain off? Just make sure you're in that groove. Chain back on. And one thing you should always check is that when you put the joiner on, that you have enough slack to remove the chain. But the chain will stretch, so it'll always get a bit longer. But yeah, you want to make sure you can get it off if you need to. Okay, so that looks like it's on there. Okay. Our clip is installed, and I'll just give you a breakdown of how I actually got that on there. We'll go this way because there it is there. Right, there's our join there. And what we actually did was, because there's holes a bit bigger there in the middle, but it tapers down smaller, so it actually fits in the groove and won't come off. So you start off with that hole over the top of this pin, and then slide it towards this pin, and obviously it won't only go so far. So then what I did was I used my pliers on the back of the clip and on the front of that pin, and you squeeze the pliers, and as you squeeze them it pushes it onto this link here. That pin there, it opens up. Line it up with the groove in that pin as best you can, and it'll slide into that groove, and it'll sort of close down, and it keeps a spring pressure on that, but can't come off because it's sitting in the groove, and that's how you retain your joiner. Okay, so we're all good there. Now all we have to do is adjust our chain tension, and I do that by bringing these around I'll start that at 15. That one at 15. Might go another 2. Another 2. Maybe one more. Now we've got some deflection. We need some deflection because the suspension's at its full length of travel right now. As the suspension compresses, the swing arm will come up, and that will actually get it to the point where the chain, where the swing arm is actually longer, the chain will tension up. So you need to allow some slack. It says usually about 1 inch, 25 mil of deflection. I think I've got more than that at the moment. I might go one more on each side. And that looks pretty good there. I mean, you can measure it, but I'm pretty happy with that. And right, so and that's why I really like these. They make it so easy. And I know this side is the same as that side because the numbers and the notches, if you count them the same from a numbered, I think because these actually numbered along here. Once if I started a number on each side and just click up the same amount, I know I'm dead on, and my tyre is parallel to my swing arm, and my chain is in line front and rear sprocket. So now all I have to do is do up that axle, and we're done. Put the cover back on, and for the chain guard on the front sprocket, and that's it. We've done our chain replacement. Just be aware that you will need a chain breaker when you do this, because they give you extra links, because this is a generic 520 chain. If you buy a chain from your manufacturer, you may get the exact length you need, but yeah, this is an aftermarket. It's a generic chain, so it was a little bit longer than needed to suit, probably to suit many different bikes. So I had to shorten it for my particular bike, but no big deal. It was quite easy. This is Penrite chain lube. It's a synthetic. It's non-flinging, so it won't, if you put too much on when you're driving, mainly for, not so much for your dirt bike, but your road bike, if you get the stuff that flings off, it gets all over your fairings and all over you. So yeah, that's what I like about the non-flinging type. And it's Australian made, Penrite, good company. So basically, I'll just give it a spray, rotate it, spray. And once you've gone all the way around, that's it. But I do like to try and get the outsides of the links. I find it lubricates them, and you get for a much smoother chain. Now look at that. I was getting some binding around here, and it was making not quite nice noises. Now it's nice and smooth. Alrighty, that's all for me, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.